It finally happened. After many years of speculation by the fans, Ahsoka the White is here. Dave Filoni worked on his magic so much so that Rebels ending does make a lot of sense now. And by what we saw in episode 5, it really teased what we are about to see in episode 6 as well. Because Ahsoka officially made the journey together with Huyang on this other galaxy. The pathway to Peridea is ongoing, but what Ahsoka may find on the other end might not be so glorious and so great. You see, I strongly believe that the Ezra that left this galaxy will not be the same Ezra they find on the other side, both Ahsoka and Sabine for that matter, who traveled together with Baylan and Morgan just before Ahsoka did. After watching episode 5, I really felt like I needed to make this video about Ezra again because I believe episode 6 will be epic. I believe that Thrawn will make the first appearance, and then by the ending of episode 6, Ezra will make his peak appearance, leaving us with a cliffhanger, of course. Not only peak Ezra, but in the Ahsoka series, Ezra might be one of the most powerful Jedi ever. And this potential is clearly shown in Star Wars Rebels, essentially the only series we have seen Ezra thrive. But to talk about what we will see in episode 5, 6, and therefore 7 and 8, we have to talk about Ezra's peaks and valleys, Ezra's Force capabilities and lightsaber capabilities as well. How he has come from that boy to now what we will see in Ahsoka. I have a clear timeline that I want to show you in this video. What we know is that Ezra initially received training in Form 5 of lightsaber combat. However, Ahsoka kind of gave him indirectly more training with Anakin Skywalker's Jedi holocron. This is the famous moment where Ahsoka and Ezra talk about how great of a Jedi Anakin was. This is preceding what Ahsoka learns later, that Anakin had ultimately become Darth Vader. With this Jedi holocron, Ezra began to incorporate elements of the Ataru style into his own approach, and over time, he also integrated some of Kanan's Sarisu techniques. Because he frequently faced Inquisitors during this timeline period, they were generally more adept duelists than he was at the time, so Ezra had limited chances to fully evaluate his combat capabilities at the time. So in terms of swordsmanship, initially you see Ezra struggle, but this is what I mean. This is why Ezra will be extremely powerful by the time we meet him now in this series, is because while he struggled, he eventually became such a powerful duelist that he even came to a draw when dueling with Kanan. By the time Rebels series ended, Ezra was already a great Jedi, and I believe that even though he wasn't trained in the Jedi Order properly and he didn't pass the Jedi trials, similar to Luke, he has gone through trial by fire. There is a lot more parallels from Ezra to Luke. You can see what Luke becomes in Return of the Jedi and past Return of the Jedi, so the same can very well be said about Ezra too. Keep this in mind. When talking about Ezra, always refer to Luke, who went through his Jedi training a very similar way. You see, from his early days, Ezra Bridger demonstrated an uncanny and innate connection to the Force, and even before formal training, he showcased his abilities that exceeded normal reflexes and foresight. Similar capabilities that Qui-Gon Jinn attributed to Anakin when he first met him. Ezra could sense other Force beings like Kanan Jarrus and perceive hidden objects such as holocrons, and without much Jedi training. Upon beginning his training with Kanan Jarrus, Ezra's abilities flourished in an extraordinary pace, as we can see in the Rebel series, which was even surprising to Kanan. This is doubly interesting when you consider the fact that Kanan hadn't completed his Jedi training either. With only a handful of months, Ezra grasped fundamental Force concepts that many younglings take years to understand. This is what I mean with trial by fire. By the time the Rebel series concluded, Ezra had reached a skill level that could be compared to that of a Jedi Knight that had passed his Jedi trials. Now we come to the more darker side. You see, with such power comes great responsibility, and key figures in Star Wars did notice his Force prowess. Outside of Kanan's amazement that what Ezra became, there were other people involved that noticed Ezra's Force capabilities, and most notably those were Darth Vader, Maul, and even at the end there, Emperor Palpatine was also drawn to his power. What can we say about Maul, for example? He was so fascinated with Ezra that he was keenly aware he wanted to make him his own apprentice. Maul had ideals with Ezra that both of them could become the poor man's version of Palpatine and Vader. Then we move on to Vader, of course. On Malachor 5, Vader was astonished when Ezra had managed to decipher the mysteries of the temple on Malachor. Ezra, in fact, had learned this from Maul. Even though in the end Vader dismissed Ezra altogether, he still had that hint of admiration when he saw what Ezra had achieved. And of course, who can forget the Palpatine moment, where Palpatine went so far as to try to manipulate Ezra with his dead parents, only to achieve what Ezra ultimately knew. And this is what connects that series with Ahsoka, of course, because Palpatine was after the world between worlds. More than that, of course, we know by Luke that he was trying to replace Darth Vader, and Ezra would have been a great candidate. However, most of all, it was the world between worlds. Ezra's story, though, is not just about raw power. It's about his evolution, his struggle with the dark aspects of the Force. He showed a lot during his youth, but during the Rebels series, he was still not powerful enough to go against Darth Vader in the slightest and Palpatine. And what's dangerous, what we can see in the Ahsoka series now, is that his influence from the Sith holocron was evident. There was a moment there where he executed mind control against an Imperial pilot, compelling him to turn against his own comrade. Yet for all that darkness, Ezra also showed capabilities that most wouldn't dream of. He had a connection with the life around him. It was like as if he was taught by Obi-Wan himself, because his abilities to commune with animals and natural elements is something to behold. We saw how he in the end defeated Thrawn with the Purgles. He could definitely communicate with those creatures that are pretty hard to do. Then his bond with the Lothwolves. These are another Force-sensitive species. He was even worthy enough to be able to access the world between worlds, something that not a lot of people can say, if any. We can see that Ezra made it inside, and now Ahsoka. So by all accounts, what we know, these are the only two people that had achieved this feat during their lives. I'm not talking about Anakin after death. Now, this is what I mean by Luke and Ezra's parallels, because similar to Luke in A New Hope, Ezra started as an impulsive and unfocused young man. However, after going through a couple of masters in Kanan Jarrus and then Ahsoka Tano, he ultimately became that man. He ultimately became that grown-up. Through failure, through hardship, and through training, he came to be known similar to what Luke was in Return of the Jedi, a fully focused Jedi Knight. If we grab that same parallel by what we see from Luke, Mandalorian Season 2 finale, in the Book of Boba Fett, and some stories in the comics, then Luke became super powerful. And a very good parallel can be drawn to Ezra as well. How he will become much more powerful, and what we will see in Ahsoka is essentially the thematic series itself and its message. We've been making countless videos talking about what is the theme of Ahsoka and what Dave Filoni is trying to tell us. You see, many are speculating that Ezra might have fallen to the dark side and Ezra might be a great Jedi, but I think Ezra is just one of those Force users that we are seeing right now. The thematic subject of this series has constantly been there is no light side, there is no dark side. Ahsoka is no Jedi. Baylan is no Jedi, but they are not Sith either. They are not Darksiders. They have their own personal agenda and they need to take advantage of any way they can. This is what I think the series is trying to tell us. This is what Ezra has ultimately become. When they find him in the end, Ezra will be a super powerful Jedi that has his own agenda, similar to Baylan Shinhati Ahsoka, especially in this new galaxy. I don't believe Ezra has this dogmatic view of how Kanan saw things, with Inquisitors, Sith Lords, and Jedi. Ezra in this new galaxy has created his own version of what a Force user should be. The most interesting part is what has he done throughout all these years with Thrawn? Have they been working together against a common enemy, or have they created their own factions and are fighting each other throughout all these remaining years? So that's going to be the most interesting part to see. Ezra will be shown to be a much more powerful, I will say, Force user, Jedi quote unquotes, but he will not affiliate himself with any faction, whether that be Jedi or Sith, whether that be light side or dark side. He will be a younger version of what we see in Baylan. Seems too crazy to be true? Talk to me down below in the comments. Let me know what you think.